Hi, and welcome to Main Street AI, the podcast where traditional businesses are quietly revolutionizing their operations with artificial intelligence and winning. In this podcast, I sit down with industry leaders from law firms and professional services, fitness and membership services entrepreneurs, and other Main Street businesses to explore their AI journey. We dive into the opportunities they see, the challenges they're navigating, and the real impact of AI on their industries. Whether you're AI curious or ready to implement, this show brings you insights from leaders who are actually using this technology to serve customers better, empower employees, and drive profitable growth. Document review that used to take hundreds of billable hours can now happen in minutes. That's transformative if you understand how to use it. Christopher Provenzano, partner at PG&B Law Firm in New York, sees the enormous opportunity AI creates for boutique litigation firms. Cases ranging from $10 million to $1 billion that once required armies of big law associates can now be handled by small, agile teams using AI strategically. Chris runs a 3-partner firm specializing in complex commercial disputes and international arbitrations, delivering big law quality without big law overhead. AI is the accelerant that makes this model work, sifting through tens of thousands of documents in minutes, identifying relevant materials instantly, and freeing attorneys to focus on the high-value creative work that clients actually pay for. His framework is simple but powerful. Use AI tasks for where it excels and reserve human intelligence for what it does best, deep strategic thinking. Let's dive in. All right, welcome. We're back with Main Street AI Podcast. Stephen Whittier, Story Coach IO. I'm joined today by Chris Provenzano of PG&B Law Firm. Chris, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Great. So as always, just ask you to start off telling me a little bit about what you do, your firm, and basically what you're specialized in from a high level.
My own career has been perhaps somewhat unusual. I started, in an entirely different academic area. I was, believe it or not, an ethnomusicologist for a while, and I got an MA from UCLA in that. And then I decided I wanted to actually do radical things like eat food and live in a house for the rest of my life. So I, changed course. I went to Columbia Law School. And then, like most people go to Columbia Law School, I went to a big law firm. I worked at Cleary Gottlieb for 7 years or so. And then I worked to another big law firm for a number of years. And neither of those was particularly congenial to me. And, then you try to find a home after that. And eventually I decided that in order to be reasonably happy, I had to start my own law firm. So I found of other Cleary colleagues of mine who became my partners, and we started our law firm 7-8 years ago, maybe now. And it's been interesting and fun since then. We get to do our basic model is to do big law level quality work in an environment that isn't big law. So we think that we present a very good option to people who have a matter that is big enough that it requires real intelligence and capability, but not so big that you need an army of lawyers. And we end up, I think, delivering as good or better quality because we can, we're flexible and we can, we're not wedded to any particular way of doing things, but we still deliver the quality, and that's essentially our value proposition.
Great. Could you talk just a little bit about your areas of specialty?
Well, we mostly do various kinds of complex commercial litigation, a lot of international arbitration and dispute resolution. My partners, I am embarrassingly monolingual, but my partners are not. And between them, they are fluent in quite a few languages. So we're very able to take on complex multi-jurisdictional cases, and that's what big law has always sold itself on, right? We have these complicated cases, like, a big law firm, by the time they've opened the matter, they've billed you $250,000,
Mm-hmm.
right? And, so for a $10 million matter, that's not really a practical, that's not really a practical avenue. So that's, we 10, 15, 20, I mean, I have a case right now that's, that my client believes that it's worth $1 billion, that's that's a lot of money. We take things that are all over the place, but our sweet spot is stuff that is very complicated and requires a great deal of intelligence, but is not a um, it just doesn't warrant the sort of big law model.
Got it.
Does that answer the question?
It does, yes. Yeah, thank you. It's really interesting. And always now starting to delve into the conversation that's so hot right now around AI. I always like to ask, what are you seeing? And I know we spoke right before we went live about, you not feeling you're an expert, don't have to be, but just what are you seeing right now in terms of AI's impact on the industry at large?
A good question. I think that it's actually a topic of a great deal of discussion within the legal community, just because it's everybody's desperate to lower their legal costs, and there's this weird spiral that big law firms keep raising their rates because they can, and they're chasing a particular amount of profit, which makes clients want to find other alternatives whenever. And I sort of divide this in my head. Places I've seen it between places where its use is genuinely helpful, reducing costs, and places where it's essentially being used to substitute for actual thinking, and there it's not so useful. So we can talk about the less useful piece first, which is, we've all seen, every lawyer has seen a brief on the other side that looks like some or all of it was written by AI. And it's, at least I think, well, it's hard to know, because if it was good enough that I didn't detect it, I didn't detect it. So maybe I've read a dozen briefs that have had it and they were just so good I didn't pick up on it. But the ones that I have picked up on are really obvious, right? This is kind of an aside, but I always used to say, I still say that one of the big problems with lawyering is that some of the most valuable time I've spent working on a case was, sat on couch for 3 hours and thought really hard.
Right.
And the problem is clients don't want to see that on a bill, right? That sounds like you're not working. But that's actually
that's the deep work, right?
That's what lawyers, in my view, really get paid for, right? And that part, once you start outsourcing that to a machine, especially a machine that's a black box and you don't know how it arrived at its conclusions, is that part is not not really healthy for the profession in a lot of ways, right? Because it devalues what we do, which is actually pretty difficult and valuable. And I'm on the American Arbitration Association commercial panel of arbitrators, but I often will take, when they're offered, just because it's fun, what they call consumer matters, right? Which are usually company versus individual. And a lot of times the individual is self-represented. And, as a decision maker, you want to give unrepresented people every opportunity to make their case. And unfortunately, a lot of the time that involves asking ChatGPT to draft a brief for them. And it is painfully obvious when that is what's been done, right? And the answers that it comes up with are sometimes helpful, but also sometimes like completely wrong, like 180 degrees wrong. And it's not doing them a service to make that, everybody should have everything available, but it's not something, it seems to me, should be encouraged, because it makes my job harder. It makes their case weaker a lot of the time, and that's not the goal of AI. So that's the bad side. Did that all make sense, or anything?
Yeah. Just on that, before we get to the pros, I think this has been a bit of a recurring theme. people come at it from some different angles, but it does seem to come down a little bit to an issue of misuse and laziness, where, I've talked to some professionals that are finding, great use cases with helping with ideation, and with drafting, but drafting is not the finished product, meaning
Yeah.
the way I've been basically, in shorthand saying lawyers still have to lawyer, like there's that level. And the other thing is the laziness would come in, I don't know what you think, but for me, that is really just, yeah, your drafting and your ideation is not the finished product. You still need to come in with your attorney's brain. But also just thinking that whatever you're going to put into a large language model, which is so general, it's like if you're using ChatGPT, this is the information that's just out on the internet, and you're going to pull from that without having any guardrails set up to make sure that you've done the things that would be necessary to prevent it from hallucinating, which is where you get those gratuitous errors, right? So I think a lot of it just comes down to people just thinking, I'm going to use this tool without really understanding how to execute and make the most of it.
I think that's exactly right. And I think it can be, as a substitute for thinking.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It's terrible. Right. As a spur to thinking, it can be very useful. And, although, one of the things that I personally think is a little bit worrying is that, part of the way you understand a case, you understand your argument, is through that process of staring at a blank page, right? Running through all these ideas and possibilities and how do you see this? And I know, at least for me, a lot of times that becomes very productive, becomes very generative, right? It makes you try, what if I don't look at it this way? What if I look at it that way? What if I turn it around a little bit? What if I, and going through that process is what gets your mind thinking creatively about things. And I think I've seen that too. People will use it, give me some ideas about X, right? And you get a list of things, and you can workshop that and have a talk about it and all that. But the thing is, you're right. If I would feel very wary about saying, give me a first draft of my brief arguing the following. Because it is often through the process of writing it that you see things that you didn't see before.
Yeah, it makes sense. Especially the type of cases you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're like, you write it up and you're like, that doesn't quite work. Why doesn't that work? And you think it through and you see something new that you hadn't seen before. And if something else is doing that process for you, you're skipping the understanding step in some. Now that said, I think it's also, we're all very busy, and there are some things that honestly don't warrant that degree of thought, right? There are some places where putting your feet up on your coffee table and thinking really hard for a couple of hours is just not necessary. And a good lawyer can tell the difference between one and the other, but a bad lawyer or a non-lawyer may not be able to.
Yeah.
So.
Did you have any more thoughts?
No,
on sort of the pros, or is that more just sort of like general observation?
That's just what I've seen. And I've heard other judges say that it's frustrating to them when they get briefs that they can't rely on. Because judges, one of the things that you need as a judge is, and some lawyers don't seem to get this, is you build up your credibility not only with the fact finder but also with the judge. The judge reads your brief, and if they know that you are scrupulous about only citing things that are relevant or that are still good law, they will trust what you write. If they start to find unreliable citations or arguments that don't cohere, they're going to approach you with a lot more skepticism. So, building that kind of trust and rapport is also important, I think, too.
Makes absolute sense. Is there anything about maybe the potential of AI that you're excited about for what it might be able to do?
There's the part like a lot of the good part of lawyering is thinking really hard about complicated things and then trying to write it or explain it coherently. The bad part of lawyering is the tedious stuff of sifting through enormous volumes of materials. In the complex commercial space, you might have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of emails and other electronic documents that are dumped on you, and you need to find out what's in there. And the traditional way of doing that is you get an army of associates and you have them look at every document. And if you have 10,000 emails to look through, which is not a lot of emails in a significant case, and it takes even 5 seconds per document to like look at it and think relevant, not relevant, needs further attention, whatever. That's still a lot of seconds. And with lawyers billing at in big law, senior lawyers are all well over $1,000 an hour now. So and even associates are in the multi-hundreds. Senior associates might be over 1,000. That adds up, right? And there might be if you're working on $1 billion case, okay, that that cost may be negligible relative to what's at stake, but most cases are not going to be like that. And if you have an opportunity to ask an AI agent to say, look at these documents and pick out everything related to blank, and it can do the job in minutes. Yes. The question is that going to be that much worse than the army of associates? And spending minutes on it versus spending tens or hundreds of hours and paying for every one of those hours. If you can do that with some degree of reliability, that's great. Yeah. And it's great for the client. It's great for lawyers like me who hate doing that. But it also, it has some professional disadvantages in the sense that I wonder if young lawyers are going to get a sense of how to look at documents and figure out whether they're important to the case or not. They're just not going to do that for very much longer. And, at least when I was an associate, that was a big part of what junior associates did, right? We're doing the tedious stuff that eventually taught you how to be a good lawyer. And when those tasks are completely eliminated, I wonder what role there will be for younger people who are trying to learn their trade.
Yeah, it's interesting. This always shifts though, right? Because like all analogies, it's never going to be exactly the same. But I remember the backlash when the internet became the thing, and people you're not going to know how to actually get to a library and research anymore. But now research, the whole concept is shifted, and we have these databases available online. So the skill set is moved and evolved, but it's still there's still these places or spaces in the profession, like you mentioned, where you still require the human that isn't going to be sufficient. So
well, look, I am not generally curmudgeonly about technology. I tend to think that yes, there are always changes, but people adapt because we still want the same things. We still want disputes to be decided professionally and correctly, and we'll get there. There's going to be a period where everybody's a little confused and a little upset about certain things, but we'll get past that. And usually people who tend to catastrophize about some new technology are almost inevitably proven to be wrong.
Yes.
Eventually. So to some extent saying this is going to kill people's ability to think strikes me as Plato saying this new technology of writing is going to destroy everybody's memory.
Exactly.
Like,
It's
which,
the technology
you know,
adoption curve plays out time and time again with each
yeah.
new paradigm. So,
And it will change, but there's no reason to believe it'll change for the worse. We focus on that. People, especially people who want to keep their jobs, will focus on how it changes for the worse. And there are, of course, because everything is a trade-off, right? Nothing is pure benefit with no drawback.
right.
And the question is, like with fossil fuels, it turns out there was a huge hidden drawback that nobody really appreciated the significance of. Like destroying our planet.
Mhm.
But with AI, I think the question is, it's with everything else, is what are we not seeing? I mean, that's actually what a good lawyer asks all the time, right?
Mhm.
That's we tell our clients always want to tell us all the good stuff about their case.
Mhm.
We sound like cynics because we're like, no, I need to know the bad stuff.
Right.
Right. That's what I need to know more than anything. What am I not seeing that I should be seeing?
That's a great question to ask. That's a
And
responsible question.
I think, I've heard you make this point before, that the problem is AI, it's a large language model, so it goes out there and sources everything that everybody else is writing, right? And by definition, that's all stuff people saw, right? Or thought they saw, or whatever. And the really meaningful question is the other one. It's what's in here that could kill my case or help my case that I'm just not seeing.
Mhm.
A process that necessarily amplifies other people's preconceptions and prejudices tends to lead to even firmer preconceptions and prejudices. And the job, in my view, the job of a good lawyer is really to ask the hard questions and try to find the stuff that other people have missed.
Yes, absolutely. Great. So what I'll do now, I'll pivot over a little bit and just talk more about your practice, your firm.
Yep.
So I know you said you basically are trying to give the big law quality without actually being big law size.
Mhm.
Relative to your industry, where would you say you're at right now in terms of growth, such as, there's mid-market, sort of like on the high end of mid-market. You said you're already not big law, but where would you orient your?
We're very small, just 3 partners and a few other lawyers that we work with, and we've liked it this way so far. Affords a lot of flexibility. I have they're now older, but my kids are now 17 and 13. So these last 7, 8, 9 years, it's been very useful to me to have the degree of flexibility that I have. Now that the older one is, about to leave for college, we hope. Then the younger one is going to high school, and I live in the city, so in the morning I just wave goodbye to them, give them some food, give them some money, and then they just turn up at some point in the afternoon. So that, so in terms of growth, I'd love, now is a great time for us, right? Now, one of my partner's kids just went off to college as twins. Another is close to getting, them all sort of self-sufficient.
Mhm.
It's, it would be nice to do, and then we're thinking about it. We're thinking about people that we might partner with, and all of that. And in law, the business, it's, when I was young, senior partners, the attitude tended to be that, we make people partners who are really good lawyers, because if you're a really good lawyer, the work will come.
Mhm.
I don't
Yes.
know that that's true anymore. And that makes it difficult, right? But honestly, the more people you have out beating the bushes, the more work comes in. So that, I think, is our goal over the next couple of years.
Okay. Yeah. So let me drill down on a couple things there a little bit more. What would you say do you have any tangible goals for, say, the next 6 to 12 months where you'd like to be?
Yeah, I think that we really are. I really would like to focus on increasing our. I hate this, I hate the word marketing in the law firm context, because I mean, the truth is, I'm a very good lawyer. I'm a lousy salesperson. And that's, I don't like to pitch people or pressure people. But, we need to do that. And, that's in part just getting in front of people, because especially when you do dispute resolution work, if you're a transactional lawyer, your clients love transactions. That's what they do, right? They go out and acquire people and merge with people and do deals and all that. So, your clients are enthusiastic about finding things that you can do. Nobody chooses to get involved in a lawsuit or an arbitration,
Right.
or an investigation or whatever. So they come up when they come up. And, that's why I think for us, marketing or business development is something that we've neglected in favor of being sort of more thoughtful and scholarly, because you just need to be on somebody's mind when a new matter comes up.
Mm-hmm.
It's like one of the difficulties, the kind of work we do, is that most of our clients are companies and they have general counsels. So, it's in some ways like being a doctor who treats only other doctors,
Mm-hmm.
which you can see why that would be very, very challenging. So we just need to be in their brains when, a new matter comes up. And, I want to spend a lot of the next few months ramping up that process, because especially when we're busy, it tends to get neglected.
Right.
And then the problem is then you get unbusy, but you haven't been doing the things that keep you busy.
Right. So that actually anticipate the second part of my question, is if you're doing any marketing or advertising. So this is more of an initiative that you're looking to do.
Well, this is actually something we've struggled with, right? Because it's because of the kinds of work that we do and the kind of businesses that we want to appeal to. Mm-hmm. It's not obvious how to get in front of them. Like, most of our work so far has come from referrals from people that we know.
Yeah.
And that's not atypical. But it would be nice to get a new client from time to time and show off for them, and because for our experience is that once people have hired us once, they tend to come back because, they're like, oh, these guys are reasonably priced, or at least, reasonably priced by New York lawyer standards. And, because we're small, we tend to be more efficient. We don't have a lot of overhead. We tend to deliver, I think, not only good quality, but good value for the quality that you get. But, it would be nice to have new people come in rather than referrals and all that. And the question is, where do you go to get in front of those people?
Yeah.
And that's, I don't know that anybody's really solved that. Big firms tend to rely on their huge institutional relationships, and, we're not, able to do that as well, because we're just not, we're not big enough to forge those kinds of relationships.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Great. What would you say? Obviously, you've talked a little bit about your ability to think through on a highly expert level of these very complex cases. Would you add anything to that from the perspective of, I always like to ask it this way, from your client's perspective, what are the things that they say over and over again positive, where you would say, okay, that defines what we do extraordinarily well?
I mean, look, in some ways, the highest, especially since mostly we're reporting to other lawyers, the highest compliment that they can pay is, gee, I would never have thought of that.
Right.
And that, those are the moments where I'm like, yeah, that's what I get paid for, right?
Right.
Or wow, you structured that argument in a way that, I wouldn't have thought of, and it's really persuasive that way. Those are the things I think that that we really like to hear. The sort of the flip side is, creativity is not generally a very valued attribute in law. Whenever something comes up, the first question tends to be, okay, what's the precedent? What happened last time? Who else has done this?
Yes.
And the really interesting questions are the ones where there isn't a lot of guidance, right? And this is something that comes up like whenever we have a case in another state, right? New York, of course, has a very big population, a lot of litigation, so there are tons of reported cases, right, everywhere. A lot of states aren't like that, right? The case law is sparse and all that, and you really have to, there. It makes it's just different. Um, and every lawyer has had the experience of researching something and thinking, oh, there has to be law on this, and then you go search and you're like, wow, there really isn't. Um, those are the places that I think we really do distinguish ourselves. I'm not sure I answered your question.
No, you did. That's actually another attorney I interviewed. He's, I think, coming up on like one of the next couple of episodes, but he has this way of defining it where it's like this hierarchy, and it was from a book. It wasn't something that he invented, but he really likes it. And I'm kind of holding my cat off here with one hand, so it doesn't come on screen. But it's the lower tier is retail law, right? That's and those are the things that are just, we already have the templates for this.
Right,
and
right.
Then we get to, okay, we have precedent, but we still need to do a little work, but it's not the highest tier. So highest tier seems like where you specialize, which is what he calls wise lawyer. That's the thing that a robot cannot replace, where, we really have to put on our creative gap. So
that's exactly right. And look, that's honestly, I think most lawyers would love to do nothing but that.
Right.
If they like law, right? I mean, there are plenty of lawyers who what they like is making money.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, the bottom level retail law is fine for that, right? Because you can do the same case over and over and over again. And as the problem though is, this is something that we often have people approach us and they're like, can you just take this on contingency? And our answer is usually, listen, we're a small law firm. We're very dependent on cash flow. We can't take on a case that's going to occupy a huge amount of our time without knowing something. So we'll often do like a hybrid arrangement where it's like a reduced hourly fee, but a success bonus if we succeed. But the big firms that do a lot of contingency, the plaintiffs firms, that's exactly what they do, right? They have thousands of cases that are all almost the same, and because they have thousands of cases, this is how I think. I mean, they certainly. Sorry, I'm going in circles here. They certainly serve an important niche, right? There are plenty of people who got hurt in a car accident or slipped and fell or something, and they need help, and that's great. There should be people to help them.
Yes.
Where something is going on outside that's making noise. So the bad side is when a law firm has thousands of cases and they're representing thousands of people and they're all contingent, as soon as they realize that one case is going to be more difficult, or it's not going to fit in that cookie cutter thing, there's a natural incentive to neglect that. Yeah. And that's where I think clients are ill-served. But that might just be if you have a $25,000 claim based on a slip and fall, you're not going to hire the people who are apt to be very thoughtful and passionate about solving your problem are going to be too expensive for you. So,
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, great. And then just to end, what I'd like to ask everybody is about your personal driving force, your why. Really, I say, aside from the growth targets, we want to grow by 25% this year or whatever. What is it that really gets you out of bed in the morning, or you're thinking about when you go to bed at night, that is your main mission and purpose for what you do?
If I'm speaking strictly professionally, not personally, I think let me tell you a story. Like when I'm really engaged in writing a brief, and I mean, when, especially appellate briefs, my girlfriend often jokes that, I'll be writing, sitting there typing. She's like, so when are you gonna be done? I'll be done in 10 minutes. And then I'm typing. And she'll come back and be like, it's been 3 hours now, right?
Yes.
And I'm like, I really didn't. I was just like really focused on solving this particular problem and figuring out how to structure this so that it makes sense and understand, and those moments of genuine flow when you are so engaged in your work that you lose all awareness of the outside world is really enjoyable. And the feeling of having your brain be fully engaged in something that's, if you read some of the literature on the state of flow, it's interesting because it needs to be difficult, but not so difficult that you get frustrated.
Right.
Those kind of problems are just having, most people don't get to do any of that in their job, and I do. It's not as much as I would like, but it is a part of it, and that's what I find I really look forward to.
That's great. I absolutely personally I relate to that very much. So
It's amazing if you especially if you were raised in a somewhat intellectual tradition. It's kind of what you're born for, right? Thinking very hard about difficult things is
yes.
What a lot of people like to do. And too much of every job, I was going to say too much of lawyering, but truthfully every job, too much of it is just doing the mechanical stuff, right? Which is certainly valuable. Like, every lawyer at a minimum needs to know the rules and where you file things and how you file things and what they should look like. But that's not why we become lawyers, right? So
Great.
okay.
Well, Chris, I really appreciate all of your insights. This is a great interview. It's actually one of my longer ones, but it was chock full.
To go on
With great, just great conversation. If people wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way to find you?
I can give you my email, and if you can add it to whatever description you have. But our website is www.pgbfirm.com. That's one of the things we're in the process of trying to revamp because we haven't touched it in years and years, because we all have other things to do. But they can do that, or I'm actually just chris.provenzano at pgbfirm.com. Listen, I'm always happy to hear from people who need help because that's what we do.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks so much for your time today. Really.
My pleasure. Wonderful. Thank you.